Ever really stop and think about what keeps you, well, going? Like the tiny sparks behind everything.
Probably not often enough.
Exactly. We're talking about electrolytes,
Yeah.
these minerals that seem simple but are just absolutely vital for, thinking, moving, everything.
Yeah.
So what are they? Which ones matter? How do they actually work inside us?
It's a great topic and often misunderstood, I think.
Right. So forget the dense textbooks. This is our deep dive. We want to pull out the core stuff you need to know about electrolytes, make it clear, make it practical.
Absolutely. You shared that document earlier, the untitled one, and it really lays out how critical these are. Our mission here isn't to drown in complex chemistry.
Right.
It's really to demystify them, explain what they do, and maybe most importantly, give folks a better handle on how they're regulated and how to keep them balanced.
Perfect. Okay, let's start right at the beginning. When we say electrolytes, what does that actually mean?
Okay, so think of them as minerals, but specifically minerals that when you dissolve them in water, like the water in your body, they get an electrical charge.
Ah, like tiny batteries?
Sort of. Some become positive, we call those cations. Others get a negative charge, anions, and because they're charged, they can conduct electricity through your body fluids.
Which is key for, well, lots of things, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. It enables a whole cascade of vital processes.
Okay, so lots of minerals out there. Which are the main electrolytes we should really focus on for this discussion?
Well, the big ones, the ones we'll really dig into today, are sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate, and magnesium.
Uh-huh.
There are others, of course, like phosphorus and chloride. They're important too, but for keeping things focused and practical today, we'll stick to those five.
Got it. Sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate, magnesium. So these charged minerals are floating around.
Hmm.
What are their main jobs? What do they do?
Their roles are honestly incredibly broad. Essential stuff. First big one, fluid balance. They're fundamental for making sure you have the right amount of water inside your cells versus outside your cells. You know, that intracellular and extracellular fluid balance.
So keeping everything hydrated properly at a cellular level.
Exactly. Think of it as managing the body's water distribution. Super important.
Okay, water balance gatekeepers. What else?
Nerve and muscle function, absolutely vital. They are literally what allows nerve signals to travel.
Wow.
Think about it, without the right electrolyte charge difference across nerve cell membranes, those signals just fizzle out.
So like you couldn't send a signal to move a muscle or even
Oh.
think.
Pretty much. If that balance is off, your ability to move, to think clearly, it's all compromised. It's that fundamental.
That really puts it into perspective. Can't move, can't think. Okay, what's another key role?
Regulating pH balance, that acid-base balance in your body.
Right, I've heard about that. It has to be kept really stable.
Extremely stable. The ideal range is super narrow, like between 7.35 and 7.45.
Tiny window.
Yeah. And bicarbonate, one of those electrolytes we listed, it's a negatively charged one. An anion is a major player in buffering the system, keeping it right in that sweet spot.
Okay, so they're internal regulators too, keeping things harmonious. Any other big jobs?
Yeah. They also help transport things, getting nutrients into your cells.
For fuel.
Right. And getting waste products out.
Yeah.
A tiny logistics team inside you managing the flow of materials.
Good analogy. Anything else on the list?
One more big area, converting food into energy. Some electrolytes are crucial cofactors in those metabolic reactions. Magnesium particularly pops up a lot there.
Magnesium, the energy helper.
Okay.
Okay, let's zoom in then, starting with sodium. We hear so much about salts and sodium.
Yeah, sodium's a big one. It's cation, positively charged, and it mostly hangs out in the fluid outside your cells, the extracellular fluid.
Okay.
And because it's so abundant out there, it has a huge impact on the volume of that fluid. Its main trick is attracting water. It has this strong osmotic pull.
Is that why? Like, if you eat a super salty meal, you feel kind of puffy afterwards.
Exactly. That's the osmotic power of sodium at work. The extra sodium holds on to extra water in that extracellular space, leading to that bloated feeling, sometimes even edema.
Huh, the post-pizza effect. Okay, but it's doing more than just making us retain water, right?
Oh, absolutely. Maybe its most critical role is maintaining the electrical potential across cell membranes.
The voltage thing you mentioned.
Yeah. Think of your cells as tiny batteries. For nerves and muscles to work, the outside needs to be more positively charged than the inside. Sodium is a key reason the outside stays more positive. This electrical difference is crucial for sending nerve impulses.
How does it maintain that difference? Doesn't everything naturally want to balance out?
It does, and that's where something called the sodium-potassium ATPase pump comes in. It's this amazing little protein machine in your cell membranes.
Okay.
It's constantly working, using energy ATP to actively pump sodium out of the cell and pump potassium into the cell. 3 sodiums out for every 2 potassiums in.
So it's always fighting against that natural balancing tendency.
Constantly. It maintains that gradient, and it uses a lot of energy. Some estimates say it counts for like 20–40% of your resting energy use, just that pump.
Wow. Tireless little worker.
Yeah.
So how does our body control sodium levels overall? Make sure we don't have too much or too little.
Primarily your kidneys, they're the masters. They decide how much sodium to excrete in urine versus how much to hold on to.
Okay.
And there's a key hormone involved called aldosterone. It's made by your adrenal glands, and it tells the kidneys to retain more sodium and therefore water. It's part of a bigger regulatory network, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or RAAS.
RAAS.
Ah,
Sounds complex.
it is, yeah. It regulates sodium, blood pressure, fluid volume. It's a major control system.
Okay. And what happens if that control system falters? Or our intake is way off? What are the dangers of sodium imbalance?
Well, you can have hypernatremia that's high sodium.
Mm.
Often happens with dehydration, where you lose more water than sodium, so the sodium gets concentrated.
Makes sense.
Or you can have the opposite, hyponatremia, low sodium. This can happen from drinking excessive amounts of plain water, which dilutes the sodium. You sometimes see this in endurance athletes.
Right. I've heard about that risk.
Yeah. Or it can be linked to certain medications, kidney problems, heart failure, liver disease, things that mess with fluid regulation.
Are there like specific numbers for those?
Generally, yeah. Hypernatremia is usually defined as sodium above 145 millimoles per liter. Hyponatremia is typically below 135. Think of it like concentration levels. Too high or too low throws things off.
Got it. So practically speaking, for most of us listening, what does this mean day to day?
Well, the reality for many people, especially in Western diets, is we get too much sodium.
Yeah. From where?
Processed foods are the biggest culprits. It's added for flavor, preservation. It's everywhere. Even things you might not think of as salty, like bread or canned soups or sauces, can pack a surprising amount.
Hidden sodium.
Exactly. And this often throws off the balance with potassium because those same processed diets tend to be low in potassium-rich foods like fruits and vegetables.
So what's a reasonable target for sodium intake?
For most adults, especially if they're sedentary or have high blood pressure or heart issues, the general advice is often to aim for no more than, say, 1,500 milligrams per day.
1,500 milligrams. That sounds potentially hard to stick to with processed food.
It can be, yeah. You have to be mindful, but it's different for athletes.
Right, the endurance folks you mentioned.
Yeah, someone sweating heavily for a long time, like over 60 or 90 minutes, might lose a lot of sodium. They might actually need to add sodium, maybe around 400 milligrams per liter of fluid they drink during exercise, to replace those losses.
Huge difference. And just to clarify, sodium versus table salt.
Good point. Table salt is sodium chloride. 1 gram of salt isn't 1 gram of sodium, it's about 40% sodium. So 1 gram of salt gives you roughly 400 milligrams of sodium.
Okay, useful distinction. So for athletes needing replacement, what are the options besides just adding salt?
Things like sports drinks formulated with sodium, electrolyte gels, even pickle juice is surprisingly popular for some. Coconut water has some electrolytes, though maybe not as much sodium, or you can make your own.
Like a homemade sports drink.
Yeah, a little salt, maybe some fruit juice for potassium and sugar, water. Pretty simple.
Dandy. Okay, let's pivot to potassium, which you said works hand in hand with sodium.
Exactly. They're like partners.
Right.
While sodium is mostly outside cells, potassium is the main positive ion inside cells.
Okay.
And it's absolutely critical for heart function, especially the heart muscle cells, the cardiomyocytes, that sodium-potassium pump we talked about. It's constantly working to keep potassium high inside cells and sodium high outside, maintaining that electrical potential needed for a steady heartbeat.
So the pump manages both. How else is potassium regulated?
Again, the kidneys play the main role in deciding how much potassium to keep or excrete. Aldosterone, that hormone we mentioned for sodium, also influences potassium. It tends to increase potassium excretion. So kidney function and aldosterone levels are key.
Yeah. And imbalances. Are they as dangerous as with sodium?
Oh, yes. Both low potassium hypokalemia, generally under 3 millimoles per liter, and high potassium hyperkalemia, usually above 5.5, can be very dangerous.
Why?
primarily because they mess with the heart's electrical activity. Both low and high potassium can lead to serious, potentially fatal heart rhythm problems, arrhythmias.
Okay, so keeping potassium in range is critical, especially for the heart. How do we do that? Are most people getting enough?
Actually, many modern diets are often low in potassium.
Really? Where do we find it?
It's abundant in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. Think bananas, potatoes, spinach, beans. The kinds of foods often lacking in highly processed diets.
So the advice is basically eat more plants.
Pretty much. Increasing dietary potassium while keeping an eye on sodium intake is generally a great strategy for cardiovascular health, including helping to manage blood pressure.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on to another positive ion, calcium. Usually in bones, right?
Bones are the big one everyone knows, yeah. Calcium is essential for bone mineralization, making them strong, but it does way more than that.
Like what?
It's also vital for nerve impulse transmission, muscle contraction, getting muscles to actually squeeze,
Okay.
blood coagulation so your blood can clot properly, and even the release of certain hormones. It's involved all over the place.
Wow. Busy mineral. So how does the body handle calcium? Where is it mostly found?
Like sodium, it's predominantly outside the cells, in the extracellular fluid, and, of course, locked up in bone. But getting calcium into the body from food requires active vitamin D.
Oh, the vitamin D connection.
Exactly. You need vitamin D, specifically the active form called calcitriol, or 1025-dihydroxyvitamin D, to absorb calcium efficiently from your gut.
And how do we get active vitamin D?
Well, it starts with vitamin D from sun or diet, but then your liver and kidneys have to convert it into that active form. And guess what? Magnesium is needed for one of those activation steps.
Ah, another connection. Magnesium helps activate vitamin D to absorb calcium.
You got it. It's all linked. And then blood calcium levels are tightly controlled by hormones. Parathyroid hormone, or PTH, raises blood calcium.
Okay.
And calcitonin from the thyroid gland lowers it. It's a constant balancing act.
What happens if that balance gets thrown off? Low or high calcium?
Low calcium hypocalcemia can happen if you're very deficient in vitamin D or if your parathyroid glands aren't working properly. That's hypoparathyroidism, sometimes seen after thyroid surgery if the parathyroids are accidentally affected.
Okay. And high calcium?
Hypercalcemia, high calcium, is often caused by the opposite overactive parathyroid glands, hyperparathyroidism. Or sometimes, unfortunately, certain cancers can produce a PTH-like substance. Very high doses of vitamin D supplements can also cause it. Toxicity.
So delicate hormonal control. What's the general intake recommendation for calcium?
It varies a bit with age and sex, but a general ballpark is around 1,000 to 1,100 milligrams per day for many adults.
Okay.
But again, the key thing isn't just intake, it's making sure you have adequate active vitamin D to actually absorb and use it.
Right, absorption is key. Okay, let's touch on bicarbonate briefly. Doesn't seem to get as much press.
Yeah, bicarbonate is kind of the quiet achiever. It's an anion, negatively charged. Its main job is being a buffer.
A buffer. Against what?
Against pH swings. Your body produces acids through metabolism. Exercise generates lactic acid. Diet can influence it. Illness. Bicarbonate helps neutralize these acids to keep your blood pH super stable in that narrow 7.35, 7.45 range.
Why is stable pH so important?
Because all your proteins, especially enzymes that run pretty much every reaction in your body, are designed to work optimally only within that very specific pH range. If it gets too acidic or too alkaline, they don't function properly. So bicarbonate is crucial.
Like the body's own antacid, keeping everything running smoothly. How's it regulated?
Kidneys again. They play a huge role in reabsorbing bicarbonate or excreting it to maintain balance.
Okay. Any practical notes on bicarbonate?
Well, you can lose a lot of bicarbonate during severe diarrhea, which can contribute to acidosis. And interestingly, some athletes use sodium bicarbonate supplements, baking soda, basically as an ergogenic aid.
Really? Why?
The idea is it helps buffer the lactic acid produced during intense exercise, potentially delaying fatigue. Bit controversial and can cause gut issues, but it's used.
Interesting. Okay, last one on our list. Magnesium. You mentioned it helps with vitamin D and energy. What else?
Magnesium is fascinating. It's mostly an intracellular carcian, meaning most of it is inside your cells, not flowing around in the blood.
So it's hard to measure accurately with a standard blood test.
Exactly. A blood test only shows a tiny fraction of your total body magnesium. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's inside the cells where it does most of its work. Sometimes docs might measure red blood cell magnesium for a slightly better picture.
And what is it doing inside those cells?
So much. It's involved in muscle function needed for the proper release of calcium to allow muscle contraction and relaxation. It's a cofactor for like over 300 different enzymes.
300.
Wow. Yeah, involved in countless metabolic reactions. And crucially, as we touched on, it's essential for making ATP, the main energy currency of the cell. Magnesium has to be bound to ATP for it to be biologically active.
So no magnesium, no usable energy, basically.
It's fundamental to energy production. From muscles working to nerves firing to making proteins, magnesium is right there in the thick of it.
A true powerhouse mineral. Okay, we've covered a lot: sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate, magnesium. If you had to boil it down, what are the key takeaways?
I think the first is just appreciating how absolutely fundamental these electrolytes are. They're not just optional add-ons. They're running the show for fluid balance, nerve signals, muscle work, pH, energy, life, basically.
Yeah, definitely more than just sports drink ingredients.
Right. And the second big thing is how interconnected they all are. You can't really think about sodium without potassium. You can't think about calcium without vitamin D and magnesium. They work together in this intricate balance.
That interconnectedness seems really key. So after this deep dive, what's a good final thought for people to consider?
Maybe just take a moment to reflect on your own patterns. How much processed food versus whole food are you eating?
Mm,
Thinking about sodium versus potassium there. Are you getting enough vitamin D, maybe enough magnesium-rich foods like nuts, seeds, leafy greens?
mhm.
It's not about obsessing, but more about awareness. Especially think about hydration. Are you just drinking plain water? Or do you sometimes need to consider electrolyte replacement, depending on your activity or the weather?
Right.
So maybe the question to mull over is, thinking about your own lifestyle, diet, and activity level, what's one small, simple adjustment you could perhaps make to better support that delicate electrolyte balance your body is working so hard to maintain?